this video we're going to show you how to use the digital multi-gauge to set up your router bits on Hoffmann Dovetail Routing Machines. As always, when we do any kind of adjustment on the motor, on the router bits, we want to be sure the machine is unplugged and keep the cord with the plug in your line of sight visible so nobody can plug it in by mistake while you're working on the machine. The next thing we'll do is we'll raise up the router carriage so that we have the router bit about 3/8 to 1/2 inch above the table. On the MU2 machine that I have here, what we do is we loosen the lock nut and then simply raise the motor up and lower this threaded stem. And that keeps my router bit up above the table. I'll take my center plate off so I have some room to work. And this is the digital setup gauge that's available as an accessory. It's a very well made plastic U-frame here that's very sturdy, digital display, and the measuring stem that will extend down about 2 inches and can come all the way up about 3 inches, so you have a total plus minus range of about 5 inches. We really don't need that much to set a router bit, but there are other uses for that gauge as well in woodworking and metalworking, and that's why it's got that range. To use the jig, first thing you need to do, you turn it on and you need to reset it to 0. And to do that, you place it flat on the machine table, push it against the back fence, slide the measuring stem all the way in and press the 0 button. And you can now see it's reset to 0. We can now slide it against the router bit and take a measurement, and you'll see it shows 5.09, which is very, very close to the 5.1 millimeter setting. That is the average or factory setting for W2 router bit. Depending on the key size that you use, the router bit that you use, a W1 bit, the factory setting is 3.5 millimeter projection or 0.1378 inches. On a W2, like I mentioned, the factory setting is 5.1 millimeter or 0.2001 inches. And on the larger W3, the factory setting is 6.8 millimeter or 0.2677. You can simply switch that gauge over from millimeters to inches if that is easier for you, and you'll see if I switch it over to inches, it'll show me 0.200 and 0.5 on the end. Again, very close to the factory setting that we want. The reason we want to use this gauge, instead of or in addition to setting up the bit with our square stop with the machine steps, is that the machine steps give me an average or factory setting that'll work for most applications really well. But once in a while you may encounter a molding that requires an adjustment of the setting, especially if you get into shadow box material that is tall and thin, floater frames. If you need to use an oversized W1 or W2 bit, you may find that even with this factory setting, when you drive the key in, there is a chance of some splitting if the material is simply too thin. And this gauge will allow you to now adjust the bit by 0.1 millimeter back to take some of the sideways pressure off. The adjustment of the bits in the machines is always done by moving the whole motor in and out. Do not try to just move the bit in the collet. That really doesn't work too well, because every time a collet nut is tightened up, it tends to pull the bit back just a little bit. And you'll spend a lot of time trying to get it right. It's a lot easier to install the bit, get it very close to where it needs to be in the collet, do the fine adjusting by simply loosening the screw here on the MU2, MU2P, it's on the top. On the X20, X25 machines, the motor bracket screw is on the bottom. You loosen it just a little bit, just enough so you can move the motor, and you carefully move the motor in and out. Just like you need to adjust the motor back to take some of the pressure off the joint on thin molding, you also have the option of bringing the motor in a little bit on thicker material. If you get into really heavy stock, I have a sample here of a heavy floater frame that we joint with 2 keys. On something like this, we could bring the motor in about 0.1 millimeter and increase the draw and the tightness and strength of the joint. Again, the digital multi-gauge is available as an accessory. It works with all benchtop Hoffmann machines, and it's a great tool to have in addition to the setup gauge that is part of the square stop that already comes with the machine.